Kia ora, everyone. Lovely to be here, and we've just changed the plan to Plan E yet again because of the intros there, but I guess maybe to preface it a little bit before we get kick into this panel session, if we think about why we actually need a panel on ways of working together, I guess that sort of speaks to the fact that we're not doing it as effectively or as well as we could do. I think for me it comes down to, if we think of all the challenges, the significant challenges that our sector faces for the future, but also the huge opportunity that's there as well. I think here in Aotearoa, we're too small to go it alone. We've got finite capital, we've got finite people, we've got finite effort, and if we can figure out a way to work better together, we might kind of crack some of those issues, some of those challenges. So I wasn't going to introduce myself because I was relying on Kyla to do that. That's all good. Don't stress. But as she said, my name is Brig. I work in the KPMG Propagate team, which is a specialist agri-food advisory team, one of those dreaded consultants. But my creds do go back originally to the dairy industry and nearly a decade of working on farm and with farmers in that sector. So that's enough of me. I'm more keen to hear from these two wonderful panellists here. So what we might do is let them introduce themselves fully and maybe how you found yourself sitting on a panel about working together. So we'll jump to you, Emma, and then you, Stu.
Kia ora, everybody. So Emma Crutchley, I am a sheep and beef and arable farmer from the Maniatoto in central Otago. I have a long history in I'm a perennial in the primary sector, I would say. Probably third to fifth generation on the farm, and went off to Lincoln and then came home to the farm about 15 years ago, and from there we live in an incredibly dry climate, so I found myself sort of deep in community irrigation governance for a few years, which moved on to sort of that catchment approach, and not only around water quality, but in a dry climate where we live, it also brings into question water quantity. And from there moved on to the catchment group space, where when the Jobs for Nature funding came available in 2020, we got a group together to form a project around catchment enhancement and restoration, which was and I think one of the reasons for the success of that project was the multi-stakeholder approach, which was bringing together not only farmers but groups from wider environmental groups, Department of Conservation, our regional council, everyone with an interest in freshwater and catchment restoration, really. So from there, I sort of moved into doing a lot of work in industry, very interested in the climate change policy space, as well as sticking around probably the water space at a more national level. And so for me, I guess, I'm not sure, I think the reason I'm on the panel is someone rang me a few months ago, but I think one of the challenges we face is that we came through the 80s and we found ourselves in that, I was little at that time, but that time where subsidies were removed, and we became very self-sufficient as individuals. We farmed our way out of it as individuals. But today we face challenges which are collective. And so it's a mindset shift. It's a mindset shift to how do we tackle challenges at a catchment level and even a national level around climate mitigation and emissions reduction, given that the problems that we face are up to no individual to solve. And I guess for me, they're all wicked challenges, which means that the challenge itself is they're not black and white. They'll probably never completely be solved, but that doesn't mean that for any instance that we should never try. And it also is, everyone's got skin in the game, And so that brings a lot of emotion, and it brings a lot of challenging conversations and brave conversations that need to be had around how we actually move and adapt. And I guess for me, in the last term of government, it became clear that we had a government that was moving very fast in this space, which also brought to the forefront a lot of emotion. And so I think, that's probably me. That's probably how it sort of came to that. We need to find better ways of working together, I suppose. Yeah.
Thanks, Emma. Stu.
Kia ora tātou, hui hui mai nei, ka nui te mihi ki te mana whenua o tēnei rohe rangatānei, ka nui te mihi atu ki a koutou mō tō manakitanga ki a mātauranga nei, hoi anō, tēnā tātou. Yes, ko Stu Muir taku ingoas. I'm Stu Muir. I'm born and bred on the banks of the Waikato River just before it hits the sea. Currently milking 500 cows there, and very, very lucky, a bit like yourself, to have been brought up there intergenerationally. My kids are about 6th generation on our farm, but our neighbours are about 26th generation on the farm. And having been brought up amongst many kaumātua, both Māori and Pākehā, really influenced the way that I think and the way that I farm and the sort of mahi that I ended up getting into. And it's kind of that mahi that's got me here, which was being on the Waikato River, obviously, whitebait, duck shooting, healing, the ngahere, the ocean, all of those things as Kiwi kids, you're brought up with. But we're also aware of how it had declined over the generations, and especially in the last 200 years since my family had been there. So, long story short, I won't get into detail, but ended up opening up one of the major channels onto the Waikato River, which is very important to our whānau, to our neighbours, and to Tainui in particular. And I guess that's why, like everything that I try and do, it's always been go to the kaumātua first, and if they approve it, because let's face it, there's 800 years of knowledge, e homa, there, and they know what the problems are and also the solutions. So I've always thought, well, if they back me, then I know that I'm on the right path. Leading on from that was, getting involved in other organisations like the Endangered Species Foundation. I became chair of that, and I made sure before I left I turned it into a co-governance model. Particularly in this political climate. Some people said, why do you do that? And I said, this is exactly the time you do something like that. That's what leadership is. It's not always the popular thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. So there's a dude you probably all know, Tawera Nico. He's now taken on my role as chair. So yeah, I've done that. And then now also working with the Waikato River Authority. And the good thing about that is that I'm coming from a perspective from down Pāharakeke, right down in the Repo. I was got the funding way back when they first started. So I'm coming in with a perspective that actually how you make intergenerational change is that you start at the bottom, at a family level, and you build out from that. And in doing so, you build capacity and confidence, and then you can take on the bigger challenges. But if we only ever try and work up here, it's good, but I think you get better buy-in in the long term and bigger intergenerational change by bringing everyone in from the very beginning, from the bottom to the top. I think that's kind of me-ish.
You can see why I was pretty chuffed to be sitting on this panel moderating these two. We were going to jump into our first question, why is it so hard to work together? But let's park that, because you both actually touched in both of your intros around politics and this politicisation. So I'm keen to hear from both of you, how can we shift the sector's focus out of these political cycles? It's very, very easy. I remember when I was a consulting officer, we'd be going out trying to get change on farm, and the response I'd get was, well, I'm just going to wait 3 years and these guys will change and it's not going to be a problem anymore. So how do we actually bring the sector to actually shift our focus out of the political cycle?
Yeah, I guess we're always going to, we run businesses as farmers that are incredibly intertwined with the environment around us. And so there's always going to be a public interest in what we do. And for me, the government will always respond to what the public wants, what the public sort of is asking for. And so by focusing on the government all the time, we're losing sight of where the conversation actually starts. And I think that comes back a lot to what Stu was saying around that bottom-up approach. Is if you can build those relationships at a catchment level and then work from there, you're actually starting to smooth over what can be a massive pendulum swing. That I worry about at the moment is that if we, like in the last term of government, there was a lot of that top-down, which scared a lot of people and it brought a lot of fear and it almost went too far and it pulled in the focus to focus directly on the government, whereas somehow we need to actually realise what the problem is we're trying to solve, and that's not going to be on anything the government has to do. It's going to be taking that long-term approach at a catchment level, building those relationships with the people that actually vote for the government, because as a farming sector, we've got very little. These days, we've got less and less political power all the time. We're a small part of the sector, but it's how do you realise what the problem is, see the bigger picture, and then start to focus on building those relationships so you can actually come up with the solutions before it gets to that where the public is actually voting, and that pushes things too pendulum the wrong way, and we end up with the blunt top-down rules that we saw a lot of in the last term of government. And we needed a change, we needed some more regulation around that, but it's actually how do we get the right mechanisms in place before the next government changes so we can actually get them right. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Stu?
Many and varied. So sorry, I'll go from one to the other probably. But actually, first touching on your thing about why it's difficult to work with people, is because some people are just pricks. You know, let's face it, they are. And then you got another subset of people, and they're special too. And I call them PLAs, Progress Limiting Authorities. And you all know them. They turn up on your farm or whatever with a clipboard, and they tick 19 of the criteria, but the 20th you may not make, so therefore you can't do it. So there's that. Anyway, I'm being a bit facetious, but it's true.
It's all good. We're standing between these people and drinks.
Yeah. I'm just whetting your appetite for a drink because I'm going to need one at the end of this. I think. Yeah, that whole cycle of the political cycle is just negative. And that's why I keep going back. We need to think intergenerationally. But I actually think we've been let down from our leaders in a large degree. I think there's amazing things, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. There are farmers up and down the country and all industries people are trying to do. But what frustrates me is that when, particularly with the dairy industry, hey, we were the cause. And we still are. We've still got a long way to go. But we started 20 years ago to make big improvements. But what annoys me is that if some of our other industry leaders and the other sides of agriculture and horticulture and forestry, if they couldn't see that what we were dealing wasn't going to affect them, why didn't they, if they put as much effort into advocating the government and the councils not to change, which is basically what a lot of them did. They were in denial, and this is too much, too hard, too fast. We don't want to do it. Just let the dairy sector do with it. The sheep and beef and the other sectors would be in a much better position now because they would have been able to get more money out of councils, more money out of government. But by pretending that climate change isn't real, that no, we can't do it, it's only the dairy sector. We're all whānau, we're all cousins in agriculture, whether we're forestry, fishery, horticulture, whatever. We're all out in the weather. We all face the same problems. We've got slightly different ways of finding the solutions, but we get polarised, or we just leave it up to one sector. But we all have to, one, take responsibility for the place that we're in, but I do think that we have been let down by, let's say feds and some of our meat processing companies, because they just thought we could carry on business as usual, and doing nothing's not an option. It's here. We've got to change, and we are changing. And in the consequence of it being polarised, you've got to a point now where it's been left. People aren't in a financial position, because that's a big key driver. If we all had the money to do it, we'd do all of those things, generally speaking. Apart from that, there's a sector that never will, but we can get into that. Next question. But, does that sort of answer I could be entirely wrong, but from my perspective, looking at it from an industry level, I think, no, they could have done a better job in preparing their people, their suppliers, to be in a better position than they find themselves in 2024.
Emma, do you want to respond as our sheep and beef farmer on the panel? We've got two redheads here, so we promise fireworks, but I think one of the things that we talking about up in the green room is that it seems like there's regional differences in terms of land use, industries that are causing problems, but maybe that's also because we're taking such a us versus them siloed approach to this particular challenge. So just, in fairness, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I think you were fair at the start when you sort of said that each industry has its flaws, and I guess that's where I come to is I think we've got to lift it out of the land use game, and we've got to talk about, okay, catchment level, what are the challenges within that catchment that we have to solve? There are multiple solutions to an individual challenge, and one challenge can be used to solve multiple solutions. And we need advocacy in a way that frames up a pathway for the diversity across New Zealand, because New Zealand is incredibly diverse. Like I fly into Hamilton, it's a completely different landscape from Central Otago, where I'm from. Like, everyone has a different way, different challenges and different ways to solve them. What I think, I'm just going to launch, and we touched on the advocacy stuff, and advocacy can get muddied with activism, and activism is confrontational, it's not collaborative. And so, as a country, or as a sector, I think we need to have a really hard look on what advocacy actually is to us, because when it's muddied up with lobbying, when it's muddied up with activism, that actually is confrontational. And as a sector, we cannot have those big conversations with our public on what the challenges are in the sector, because we can't actually agree on what they are ourselves. And for sector leadership to be able to step into that space and actually advocate for us in a way that suits what we're trying to achieve, that can't happen when it's almost being leading in that space is almost a dangerous place to be. It's not a safe place. Yeah.
Thanks, Emma. So is the solution then, we'll go to you, Stu, first, is the solution to just have one voice then and not have this? Because that's been a solution that's been bandied around a little bit since the start of this year. Is the solution one voice?
Nah. I mean, I believe in Kotahi. I think that's great, but regional problems and regional solutions actually need those regional they know what's wrong in their place, and they're the best ones to solve it. My thing, I mean, a single voice. Well, no, we've got to work alongside mana whenua. And I don't mean like working aside as in ticking the boxes. Oh yeah, we had a cup of tea. That was consultation. Now we'll go ahead and inform you about what our decisions are, because that's kind of where we've been, and that's unacceptable. But when we do work together, we create great things. You could see it with up to Toa Taiao, as Hami was talking about before. During the crises, everyone worked together. Some were better set up than others, but they all sort of uffed each other and got through. With the Waikato River Authority, same thing. Here's this organisation set up by the Crown as part of the treaty settlement, Pākehās and Māoris working together to fix up the problems that the Crown and Pākehās created in the first place, but it's working. It's a solution because we're working together. If we could get a single voice, it would be great, but we can't all agree, and I don't think we should all agree. You've got to be able to debate, because it's those those really quite different opinions that actually end up finding a solution somewhere in between.
Yeah.
But if you don't have those, we just stay where we are. And to your point, you don't where you get completely hijacked by one group, and then it becomes destructive and polarised, just as we're seeing all around the world at the moment.
Yeah. So like one voice. Okay. I don't think it comes back to that saying in governance, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So culture is actually eating this industry up at the moment, and so I think that's actually our biggest challenge. It doesn't matter how you structure it if you can't get your culture right. Like we've got a position where there are people that don't want to come on the journey of change. That's fine, but there is also quite a large proportion of our sector that is getting captured by the wrong information or the wrong narrative that's being fed to them from the wrong places. Like we've got we don't share a reality of what the actual challenges are. So what that means is a small minority group can actually mobilise strong emotions into anger, and actually when that happens, leadership is actually, it doesn't matter what kind of structure you have, leadership's not even a safe space to be. And so I think, I guess it's so what do you do when we don't have a leadership problem in our sector? The problem that we have is we don't have a space for leaders to lead, and so how do we actually all collectively challenge that? Because we need to have a space for leaders to lead, and a space where they can lead without fear of that small minority groups being able to actually harness those strong emotions and mobilise them to a place where they actually can't lead anymore. And then you don't get leadership stepping up to face those challenges either. Would that be fair?
Can I just add to that? So we're on an organisation, Dairy Environmental Leaders Forum, which is it's a great forum, but I'd actually like to see the dairy side of the title dropped and actually become Environmental Leaders Forum. So
100%.
we've got people from all of the sectors coming in and adding to the conversation and adding to the solution. Then you're more likely to get a positive, unified voice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's another way of answering it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I just want to touch on something you talked about, Emma, before around not having the same realities, and how do you cut through all of the noise of the information, the disinformation, the misinformation, and I know they're all slightly different things, but the algorithm will feed you a self-perpetuating sort of reel.
Yeah.
So how do you cut through that, and how do you cut through that for others within your sector? Because you're living in these communities with other people that have incredibly different perspectives and realities to you. So how do you do that?
I heard this really cool quote the other week, and it was leadership is like invisible magnetic threads. When you turn those magnetic threads from invisible to visible. And so even though we don't share a reality, there is always someone who can relate to someone that's in a different on a different wavelength of what the information is, or there is some common ground that you can find, and it's finding that. And sometimes it will be a trusted intermediary or a trusted person that can actually bridge that gap. But I think for us to move forward as a sector, I think we need to be clear on what the problem is we're trying to solve. And for me, a lot of that problem that I see is actually around that information ecosystem. And if we can shape some frameworks around advocacy and how we advocate that actually feeds into that and all knits together, then we're actually starting to make a little bit of progress. But it is made challenging because it's a worldwide problem, right? Like these logarithms and how they're taking people into dark pathways, and it's all can lead into mental health and wellbeing issues for rural communities as well. So when you're in that state of threat and fear, it's really hard to see the pathways out of it.
Stu, I have a feeling I might know where this is going, but how do you work with people who have got diametrically different viewpoints to your own?
I get on with it. And actually, I don't care if that person wants to actually end up in the same space with the same result with me. I'll work with them. You just put all of that aside. Otherwise, you become petty. But with those ones that can't change, what I just do, I just go hard out, get done what I'm doing, and then they can kind of see that me cleaning up my backyard's benefiting their backyard, resonates with some part of the way of their life, and they actually want to become part of that. And so you get that ripple effect. So that, to me, is a much better way of creating change, is by going ahead, doing what I'm going to do, knowing that I've got enough support behind me, but not necessarily alongside at the time. And that's my kind of methodology. I'm not really one. I know this is hard to believe, but I'm probably not going to stand up and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, at this stage. I mean, although I do want us to get to that space, but no, I just get on, get the job done, and work with the positive. Just keep positive. Other people that suck, they're just. I haven't got energy. I've only got one. I'm only going to die once, I hope, and I've got a lot to do in the next 20, 30 years. And I just I'm not going to let negative people get in my way.
So it's results and evidence based.
Yeah, because once they can see it, I mean, honestly, a lot of people thought I was just expanding my dope growing empire down the river, or paying off my debt with all of this treaty money. But once they could actually see what it was doing, and it was having a really positive effect on the environment, and that I was still farming well, farming, being environmental and being a good business person is not diametrically opposed. So they could see that, the farm was still, modern and up to date and really well run, but I was being able to do these other things by putting aside the marginal bits of land and returning it, regenerating it to what it was in the first place. And because they could see it wasn't harming my business, I went, maybe he's not a complete dickhead, and it encouraged more people to start doing it. And my district we're not the most liberal district where I come from.
I think we've got time for maybe one more question before we get booed off the stage. But we've sort of touched a little bit on these people who will just never get on board. What do you think about the argument that we can't leave people in our sector behind? And I'll leave it there, and then maybe we have a follow-up. Emma?
You're never going to bring everyone. I'm fully in alignment with Stu on that one, but it's also creating the space for people to come. If they want to come, leave the bus door open. If they don't want to be on the bus, fine. Yeah, that would be all I'd say. Yeah. Given that we're such a cooperative-based sector, do you think that flies a little bit in the face of the spirit and history that kind of comes with that, or do we need to move away from that? Do you have any answers?
No, I don't think we should ever move away from the cooperative spirit, because that's what's got us to where we are. And despite being, the most conservative, supposedly bunch in the country, we've got the most socialist-based organisation structure that you could possibly have. And I think our strength is actually in that cooperative. So no, I'm very strong upon the cooperative. But there are people, let's face it, there's a generation of people left that don't like change, have never had to consider change or thinking outside the koru. And unfortunately, they're not going to necessarily change, but they may not necessarily always be there. So just haere tonu on our path, and hopefully the majority will come in.
And I think it's sort of I think we need to look at the sector and consider whether it's set up for us to succeed in 2024, the organisations we've had that we've got now have been really, really good in the past, but I think we really need to ask ourselves the hard question is, are they suitable for what we are faced with in 2024?
Brilliant. I think that's a good sort of point to end. So I'd just like to extend my gratitude to both Stu and Emma for rolling with the changes and for being, very candid and honest with our audience, and thank you both.